Morning, everyone. Welcome to the 7th episode of SecuriTEA Crumpets, where we host security professionals each month. Let's talk about different security topics. I'm delighted today to have Dr. Mario Heiderich on the stream. Mario is a powerhouse in the world of application security. He even has a Ph.D. in cross-site scripting. Mario classes himself as an ex-researcher and is a lecturer at the Ruhr University in Bochum. Mario is the founder of a quote-unquote boutique pen testing firm, Kill53. Maybe you've heard of it. He's the creator of DOM Purify, one of the most used client-side sanitizers in the world. Welcome, Mario. Welcome to the stream.
Hello there, and thank you very much for having me.
Great. So how are you doing today?
Quite fine, quite fine. Could be worse. Weather is on and off. Like now, right now the sun is shining, as you could see, because my face is going to be like super bright. But yeah, it's a good day. Cannot complain. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I mean, it's 8 in the morning, which is a little early, but in general, I'm doing absolutely fantastic. And it's great to have you on the stream today to basically ask you questions I've wanted to ask you for a while. Just haven't done it because it seems, weird to like send someone an email these days. So let's talk about your background for a hot minute. So you did a Ph.D. in cross-site scripting. Can you tell me about the origins of how that came to be? Like having a Ph.D. in cross-site scripting actually seems quite unique. Maybe not in today's standards, but I assume when you were doing it, it was probably quite nuanced.
Yeah, I was actually inspired by like someone else who did the same thing back then, a little bit earlier than me. And that person was Martin Jons, and he also has like a PhD in cross-site scripting. And well, to be quite honest, cross-site scripting was like the only thing I could really do quite well back then. And I had the chance for like an academic career through a project position, and I was like, why not? So I read his PhD thesis, and I was like, that's actually quite nice. I could do that too. And then I tried, and it worked, and there we go.
Got it. No, I actually have read your PhD, which is I don't know if that's a curse or a blessing in many ways, but it was quite interesting to see the transition from, you start talking about the different ways cross-site scripting can happen by like things like downsampling, when you move into basically breaking all of the different types of sanitizers, which kind of transitioned into what you're really doing today, which is like things like DOM Purify. We'll talk about DOM Purify in a little while, but I just want to keep more in the academic world for now. So you've been a lecturer at the Ruhr University for probably over 11 years now, right? What has that been like? Or maybe not that long, but it's been a while.
Actually, it's not that super long that I have really been a lecturer. So it started all with like a project position that was supposed to be for someone else, but that someone else got hired by some firm, and then I decided to go to that firm instead. So the position was open, and I was asked if I wanted to kind of fill it. And I basically said, I don't know, maybe, but I don't really have that much time because I was also doing a gig for Microsoft back then with relating to browser testing. So I basically said I could do it, but if like a 50% position would be on the table, then we can pretty much sign right now. And then they said, yep, why not? And found like another person who did the remaining 50%. And he was then my office mate. And yeah, so that is how it pretty much happened. And I was pretty much doing project work for a couple of years, and on the side actually did my PhD. And managed a couple of programs that we had in university, like the HackPra, after taking it over from a couple of other people, and so on and so on. And the whole lecturer thing, it only started around about 2 years ago, like 3 years ago. So my first actual lecture, that was like an actual registered lecture with like students coming in and writing exams and these kinds of things, that happened last year. So that was the first one, and it happened right before Corona hit us hard. So I think I started in late February and finished in early March, and then all of a sudden it wasn't possible to travel anymore. So the one that I did this year was a bit weird because I still had to go to the university and do all the teaching, but in front of an empty room. So it had to be happening with like the uni hardware and your uni camera and the licensed Zoom account and all these things. And the responsibility for like the bandwidth and all these things had to be, of course, like in the uni sense and not my own, because my internet connection might fail or might more likely fail than the uni ones. And yeah, so I was like basically standing in front of the room with no one inside and did my lecture. That was not that super crisp and sexy, but it still worked out. And I'm not really sure how it's going to be next year. If next year I'm going to be there with students in the room again or not. But yeah, let's see.
I see. That must be. I've seen like my old lecturer. He's been doing YouTube videos recently, and he has. I think he's also been doing it at university because the way the camera's positioned, it's like looking down at his body in a really obscure way. So it just looks really strange. If he's watching this, I'm sorry. It just looks so weird. So okay. So you've actually like from the lecturing side. So I know that you were overseeing people's projects. Was that something before the initial lecturing position? Because I know you were like, yes. So
that was like one of the parts of the job that I did with the uni, both as a PhD candidate and as an actual PhD and then postdoc. Was basically like supervising master thesis and bachelor thesis and stuff like this.
And are there any like thesis and like bachelor's or master's PhD research that has been done by people that you've overseen that you just didn't expect to hear about, or like or like was quite blown away by the work that was done?
Yes and no. I mean, sometimes you have pretty regular stuff, like people just want to get it done, so they just like write about something that they know stuff about, and then it's being put on paper, and then they're like done and happy with it. And it's not really super fascinating to kind of look at those and supervise those because you notice that people just want to get it done. But sometimes you have like these unicorns and you read something that is truly outstanding. And one example for me was Jan's thesis on breaking AngularJS, because he wrote like I think it was a bachelor thesis purely about breaking the AngularJS sandbox. And that was awesome.
Yeah.
It was also one of the shortest theses I ever read because it was like, I don't know, like just a few pages, like 40 pages or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
But it was epic because it contained pretty much the anatomy of a bypass, how it works, explanations step by step, and finding new ones, even in the hardened versions and stuff like this. That was pretty awesome indeed.
Nice. So that was like in relation to the 1.5.9 or something like that, right? Like the one which was like super, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly, like super long one where you pretty much had to change the entirety of the logic that was happening inside AngularJS, and then eventually managed to get like a function pointer, or like a reference to the function constructor and do stuff with it.
Yeah. Okay, that's really cool. So I have one more thing. So I remember when I was trying to do a PhD, didn't really work out. But like at the university I went to, I was the first ever security researcher, or doing security research at the university, and obviously I didn't have a security a research group or anything like that. And it feels like Germany, is kind of ahead of the curve when it comes to actually having things like research groups and producing quite strong research outcomes compared to, I guess, other parts of the world. Do you think it's because of the things like research groups, or just because of the way the programs work there, or anything like that?
That's a good question. I'm not super sure what the actual cause is, but I guess it's just like good people in the positions of requesting funding and assembling the teams. And I guess at some point, once you have the reputation and the right people in the right positions, then it pretty much just goes on its own. So I think at some point it becomes perpetual. I'm not saying that it's like easy work to kind of set these things up and to deliver, but I guess it pretty much comes down to having the right people on your team and just letting them do the stuff that they like. And that was like always one of the things that I felt strongly towards over in Bochum, that if you were lucky and you had a good prof, then you could really just like do whatever you thought was right. And that of course yields much different results compared to, for example, someone giving you like a strict course outline of like, you research this and then this is the result and then you write it up and then you're done here. Yeah. Versus you could really just let your mind fly and just like do stuff.
Yeah, I feel like maybe that's one of the kind of like negative impacts in some of the kind of structured courses. Obviously it teaches you the basics, but obviously you do need to have some type of free will, in the sense of being able to do your own research, which may yield like unexpected outcomes, which I think is quite interesting. Obviously that may happen through natural progression through a curriculum, but I feel like that's probably some things that are lacking in some areas of the academic system.
Yeah, that might as well be. And sometimes the outcome isn't even as satisfying. I mean, looking at my own thesis, I was also surprised because in the end the result was the answer no to my question, can we have like a trusted client-side DOM that really can that we really can rely on, as in like all the properties are actually doing what they're supposed to do, etc., etc. Because back then it just wasn't possible yet. So my question was like, hey, can we have a trusted DOM? And the answer was nope, not quite yet. So, which is not super satisfying, but at least we knew why we couldn't have it yet and what was necessary, and then build on top of that.
Got it. Yeah, we're definitely going to move into that domain in a little bit. So you obviously did a PhD thesis. You worked at Microsoft, which we'll talk about in a little while. But obviously, you are the founder of Cure53. And obviously, I personally believe it's one of the best consulting companies that because one, you have open source publications, so you publish your work. You are building lots of open source stuff, which is super useful to the community and to the developer ecosystem as a whole. But what made you start to decide to build Cure53, and what took you on that journey to go into consulting?
It was mostly like a coincidence, because when I started with the whole security thing many years ago, I was a web developer, and I was working for a web development company in Cologne. And I had some beef with some of my coworkers, so I really didn't like that person, and I was like, okay, so I'm not gonna sit in the same office as you, I'm just gonna go somewhere else. So I quit my job. And that was a good decision, because my boss back then from that old company, he was like, look, I know that you do like a little bit of this kind of security stuff, and that's like interesting. And back then it wasn't like really that much of a high prio, because everybody was just like hoping that nothing would happen to them. And he was like, look, so do you want to continue doing that stuff for us? We're gonna pay you a little bit, like, I don't know, something 35 euros per hour or something like this. And I was like, sure, why not? But for that I should be able to write an invoice, right? And he was like, yeah, that would be helpful. And I was like, okay, so let's research what I would have to do to actually get to the point of being able to write an invoice. And I learned that you have to create a company. Ta-da! So I went to the city council and requested the form to set up a business. And then they said, okay, so here's the form. Please enter your first name and your last name and the company name. And I was like, I don't really have a company name. So I thought it's just my first name and my last name. I didn't know that you would ask me that. So I needed to come up with something like on the hallway spontaneously. And I was like a big fan of alphanumeric stuff back then, like the 3 being an E and the 5 being an S and stuff like this. And I was like, secure something 53 CURE. That doesn't sound great. But maybe if we twist it a little bit, Cure 53. Oh, that's cool. And then I just went with that. And it was literally just a spontaneous decision on the hallway of the city council of Cologne, and I put it into the form, and then it stuck. And we kind of kept it. So that's how that happened. And I indeed did some work for my old company back then, and then I got recommended to someone else, and I did work for other people. Then I was quite active on Twitter back then. People were actually asking like, hey, do you do pen tests? And I was like, sure, yeah, because I have a business, I can do these things. And then it grew organically over time. And at some point I was getting like so much work that I couldn't handle it myself anymore. And then someone contacted me who must have read one of the reports and was like, hey, do you accept internships? And it's like, oh, I'm just like a single dude. I don't know, sure, why not? But we can also just work together. And yes, so I got my first employee. And it pretty much just like developed like this from there on. And we're like 20 people. And actually it's a bit more than 20 meanwhile. But yeah, so it was like pure organic growth, and it was never planned to become something like this. It just so happened.
Wow, that's I never expected it, because you had to think on the spot about how Cure53 would be made. That's amazing. So let's talk about Twitter for a second. So you're no longer active on Twitter, well, quote unquote active. I'm assuming you still use the Cure53 Twitter, but you basically at one point decided you no longer wanted to have the Mario Twitter anymore. What made you decide, or the OX,
I don't know, I think it was the general climate, so to say. And when it all started, and I think I created my account for the first time in 2008, or maybe even earlier, then deleted that one, then created another one. And in the beginning it was fun, because you had a small circle of like-minded people who you could hang with, and that was pretty much one of the few communication channels where pretty much everybody would be there. In the very beginning we had Slackers. slackers.org, the forum from hackers.org from Robert Hansen. But that shut down at some point, so this communication platform was taken from us. So Twitter was literally the only thing where everybody was present anyway, so we could just like pretty much outsource all the communications to that platform. And it was amazingly fun, and you would have like, your protected account, so you would have to manually verify your followers. And by that you could basically just like say, hey, this is the circle of people I want to interact with. And it was great for a couple of years, at least the way I remember it. And then at some point, I think a certain critical mass was reached in terms of people being present on the platform and people getting more angry and people shouting at each other. And I noticed that with others, and I also noticed that with myself, that it would go ever so quickly that you would go and be more aggressive or more defensive if someone challenged you. And the overall climate over the time just like didn't really improve. And I had the feeling that it got worse and worse and worse. And there was a couple of cake fights and a couple of confrontations. And at some point I was like trying to evaluate, like, does the platform give me anything or does it just take? And I arrived at the point of realizing it doesn't give me anything. Like the information I can also receive as someone who just like reads silently, quietly from a quiet account, like our company account right now. I don't have to be involved with this anymore. And I don't want to have the fights anymore. And I don't want to be like an aggressor myself anymore because I realized how the climate also kind of changed my own behavior. And then I was wondering, could I just like do it like stopping to smoke by just smoking fewer cigarettes? And I realized that won't work. So I just decided to stop it altogether. And made it through the 30-day grace period and then never looked back. And actually am quite happy that I detached that part from my private life and am not on Twitter anymore. And there is also no intention to ever come back.
Got it. Yeah, actually I kind of agree with you in that because a lot of the conversations I have today on Twitter, I mean, obviously there are some good conversations, but a lot of them are just kind of just shouting about InfoSec stuff and like having the same conversations that, and then people just argue about X, Y, and Z, or like, why CSP is this way, or like why cross-site scripting is this way, etc. And it just gets to the point where it's just I just kind of X out these days. I don't even like. I start writing a response and I just go, no, I'm good. I don't want to do this anymore. So I think maybe I'm with you in the sense, like I feel like I won't delete Twitter, but I would like to reduce my activity.
I mean, everybody can of course do whatever they want, but I just had the feeling that didn't contribute anything anymore to like my own life quality. And based on that, I also wasn't able to kind of contribute something back. And why keep something if it doesn't give you anything back and if it doesn't help you to kind of contribute properly? So yeah, like I said, I never missed it after deleting the account. There was never any time where I was like, oh, I shouldn't have done this, but that was actually like a good decision and I stand by it and look back and think, well, that was the fine thing to do. That was the right thing to do.
Nice. So I have a question around the...
Recently I had an imposter that was quite funny. So someone registered the old account because after some time, apparently you can do this with like the same username. Yeah. And someone actually did that and rebuilt my account and actually used the old photo from back then and the old bio from back then and then used it to do like security product advertising. That was like,
oh my God.
But yeah, I actually did report this. And then it got nuked, but I was like, okay, interesting. How would anyone ever think that this is going to be successful? So yeah. Again, contributes to my assumption, to my conclusion about this not being the most valuable service anymore. At least not for me.
That's definitely a thing because I may own a domain or I own a Twitter account that was from a previous acquisition. They deleted their Twitter account after they got acquired, and I just took the domain and I just wrote lol no generics on the tweet, and then that was basically it. I never used the account again. I don't even know which email address I registered it with. Anyway, so I have a question around so on your Twitter you have, and there is fire where we walk. When did that originate? Because I know you had all those funny T-shirts for a while at Kill 53. How did that originate?
That's a good question. I could imagine that this was like an idea that was developed when being drunk, but I don't actually know anymore when we came up with that and why we came up with that. Yeah, I honestly have no idea. I just still like the sound of it, so it's still on there.
I mean, it sounds great.
Whatever the actual story is there is somewhere blurred in probably some kind of levels of intoxication.
Got it. I mean, that's definitely fire when you walk when you're intoxicated. So,
you just gets demonetized or something like this because we're talking about booze.
I mean, I don't think I'll ever get monetized, so I'm fine. We can talk about booze, it's okay. So you on the cure53.de website, there is a publications page, and obviously I have a few questions around this. I'm just going to post the website if no one's ever seen it before. There's a publications page, and what has been the most memorable, public test that you've done? Because I know on the Wikipedia it says about that South Korean test about the sheriff, catastrophic findings.
That was unbelievable. Like, that was so ridiculous. Let me actually scroll through all the reports and see if there's anything comparable or like more noteworthy than this one. And if not, then we should definitely talk about this one because that was crazy. Let's see. Oh yeah, there's another good one that we could definitely talk about. That was like Ethereum Mist. That was quite fantastic. But I think the most remarkable one was indeed the smart sheriff thing from Korea, where we more or less got the job from someone else, from some other third party, as the report also states. And the idea was just like to have a look at what they're actually doing there and to find issues. And we had like concerns when accepting this kind of test, because I was wondering, okay, so there's a system, and that system is obviously being used to surveil people, probably kids, through their parents, which kind of legitimizes this a little bit in some way, but it's still kind of fishy. Now, if we do a pen test against this thing and we find bugs, what's going to happen to those? Are they going to be contributing to the service being more secure, so it can more securely surveil other people and kids? Or is the intention to kind of bring this thing to the press and shut it down at some point? So how is this going to go about? What's going to be the result of the whole thing? And the sponsors insisted that the idea is, of course, to kind of bring the service down, and depending on what kind of stuff we would find, that might actually happen, or at least give it some negative press. And as you can guess, this is like ethically not an easy decision to say, do we want to do a test like this, or do we do more damage with such an assessment than we would do with just like leaving this thing be? And I guess in the end we were lucky, because as far as I know, the first outcome of the test that is also in the report was that there was like gaping holes. It was ridiculous. Like, it was absolutely pathetic. And there was findings that we had that were unbelievable, not from this earth. And at some point we were able to pretty much like take over control over pretty much all the phones out there from all the kids, from all the users, and claim to be their parents. So there was like an attack that really had like mass effect.
Jesus.
And then we're wondering, okay, so what's going to happen now? Because apparently then the sponsor of this audit indeed reached out to the company building this thing, and they had some conversation. And I'm not really sure what kind of conversation they had, because at some point we were told that a second test is due. And I was like, okay, so you reported the bugs, and they fixed the bugs, and now they have a more secure surveillance tool? Wow, fantastic job. Not at all. And we did the second test against the allegedly fixed application, and it really had a bitter taste. And then it turns out that the bugs were still there. They were just like hiding them behind different function and get parameter names and stuff like this. So they were really literally using like the worst possible kinds of mitigation, obfuscation of findings, or whatever you could think of. Like, it was not fixed at all. It was actually worse than before. So what came out was the second report. And then, to my knowledge, it was decided from the officials who were running this particular program, not the audit, but the actual software, that this is indeed a piece of garbage and needs to be deleted. And as far as I know, that actually happened. So I guess in the end, everybody was like lucky. And the whole exercise turned out to really have the effect that was desired. But that was pure poker. Like, we didn't know what would happen. We had like ethical concerns over the whole thing. We still did it because we were curious and it was really a fun job. And we trusted our funders a little bit that they're not going to do something terrible. And in the end, it actually worked out. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, that was actually quite close and could have gone south tremendously, but luckily didn't.
Nice. So there appears to be some issues with my audio, not yours. Alex just said on the stream, but that's fine. That's kind of crazy. That, like, you know, obviously it's really important that we get to a point where we can, you know, have secure software, but you know that there's no real guidelines or regulations in place for someone to create really bad software, right? Anyone can do it, which is kind of crazy. And then especially, I've definitely tested similar applications where I've just been like, oh my god, not good. But obviously I can't talk about them. And actually that's the question I wanted to talk about. So how do you approach companies to actually release the software? Or release the presentations. So like, not presentations, the reports. How does that process work? Because I'm sure there's a lot of companies that would love to be able to do similar stuff, but you know, for most of my part, most pen testing companies can't release their software.
Mm. Yeah, actually we don't. So the companies approach us and ask us, look, are you interested in publishing the report? And we say yes, and then it's being published. So we never had a situation where we were actually the ones actively trying to get a company to publish the report, but always the other way around. And if you have a look at the list of the publications, you will notice that lots of them are coming from RFA, Radio Free Asia, which was one of our sponsors back then. And then they changed into OTF, into Open Technology Fund. And then they were joined by MOS, the Mozilla Open Source program, and so on and so on. So most of them are actually reports that came out of programs that are basically pentest grants or sponsorships, where you take some software, be it open source or something like this, and you basically offer the maintainer a pentest, as let's say Mozilla. Or the maintainer actually can apply for a pen test at those companies, at those organizations. And then when they get that grant, we get activated, we do the pen test, we write everything up, we share the report with the maintainers, they fix all the issues, we do the fix verification, and then at a coordinated time, the whole thing goes public. But yeah, long story short, in most situations, it's actually the others asking us to publish the results versus us asking them to publish the results. And as you can see, there's a pattern in those parentheses behind the report names. We have like CNCF appearing a lot, MOS appearing a lot, OTF appearing a lot, and these are pretty much like the sponsorship organizations or the owners of the pen test who basically say, look, we're going to do this thing, but it's open source software, and as part of the software maturity process or whatever is there in place, the report needs to be public, so let's go with that.
Got it.
And for us, that was always great, and I think for us that was also like one of the key moments where we had the chance to actually showcase our work, especially when we were still newcomers, and show to the rest of the world that we can do some things. And I think the public reports actually inspired lots of people to work with us because they would know what they would get versus this whole level of secrecy is like, no, we're not sharing our reports, you can't see them. Because, I mean, this is not helping anyone. Mm-hmm. Especially no one is being helped by that who never had a pen test before and has no idea how the process looks and how the resulting documentation looks. So they can just come here, have a look at that work, and they know exactly what's going to be on their desk after the pen test is done, which pretty much helps everyone.
Got it. Yeah, that's definitely, like, I guess, like, it just kind of, it also shows chops, right? Because a lot of people don't like to, air what they've been testing or, show their dirty work. And at least, when it's out in the public, people can see what you actually tested, what you found, your approach, your methodology, kind of everything that you kind of encompass, which I think is like, it's definitely a good selling point, right? As a business for many reasons.
It is. We also got a lot of shit for this, obviously, because sometimes people didn't like what we were writing up, and sometimes we wrote something up that was not accurate, or we were missing something, or we were over-dramatizing, or getting the severity levels wrong. But I guess it's okay, because you learn through that, and through the public feedback, you also kind of take something away, even if the feedback is negative. So I was never too offended when someone gave us shit for the reports, because they didn't like stuff in there. Oftentimes we were able to discuss it with the people. Sometimes we would just ignore it if the feedback was like really, really bad. But in the end, it was like part of the learning process. And hey, like there's worse things than someone telling you that they don't like your work. So Like we survived that.
Yeah, I definitely believe so. So I have, before we move away from the consulting world, you gave a presentation about how to build your own like boutique security company. I'm also going to share with the stream. If you were to recommend like 3 things when if someone was considering to like start their own pen testing company, what would it be? It could also just be 1, but if you have 3, that's great.
That's a good question, because now I need to kind of prioritize which are potentially like the most important ones and the least important ones. I don't want to sound kitschy or anything, but it all comes down to your team, obviously. Like if you have a team that is not highly motivated and doesn't love what they're doing, then you won't be able, or it's going to be very, very hard to write good reports and to build up reputation and then get customers over customers, etc. So that is something that is like of key importance. You have to have a good team. You have to be motivated yourself. And I think, as stupid as it may sound, you shouldn't do it for the money, because the money will come in the end anyways. So this is still like a high yield business where you can ask for high daily rates and expensive contracts, but you shouldn't do it because of that. You should do it because you like it, because you actually love pen testing, you love security work, you love to interact with clients to actually help them to get stuff done, and so on and so on. If that is your motivation, then the money will come automatically. So I would say this is like the next bit that you have to have in check, that you yourself as the person running the operation needs to be motivated by actually what you're doing and not what you're getting for what you're doing. And then last but not least, I guess what is also quite important is to have like a thick skin, because you will get a lot of front wind and a lot of resistance, especially in the early years, and you're often going to be tempted to give up and to say like, nah, I'm not going to do this anymore. And you will have clients that will be really, really unfair to you, and you will have clients that try dirty tricks against you. This will happen. There's like, it's unavoidable. So it's important to kind of know that not everything is going to be peachy dandy, not everything is going to be nice, and that you have to be able to kind of deal with those things. And that also stress will happen and burnout is a risk, etc., etc. So thick skin is like, I guess, the third important element, or one of the 3 most important elements I would name here. Yes. Does that make sense?
It does. No, I completely get it, because like imagine like you're trying to start something for the first time, and if you're not expecting people to try and, especially like when you're like trying to like show that you're amazing or your company's amazing, and like people are going to try and work you to the ground, so they'll definitely try and squeeze as much as they can out of you for like however much price they can get. You know, you're definitely going to get a lot of feedback that may feel very impactful to you as someone who's trying to build out this kind of like, you know, small quote unquote, you know, business or, you know, empire or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I could definitely understand the thick skin aspect of that. And you know, if you don't have a team that's like invested and supporting each other, you're gonna fail in many times. If it's just you, sure, like, but like, you know, to really like scale and grow, you would need a team, especially if you were having like more than one client, for example. So I totally get that.
Cool.
So let's move into browser type stuff. So I remember, I think we officially first met like face to face was in 2017 in Belfast for AppSec EU during the wonderful All Stars time, and I attended your training, and I actually remember I ended up just walking to the hotel, and you were like standing out there at the beginning, and I was like, do you want to go for a pint? And you were like, yeah, sounds good. Training's tomorrow? Sure, let's go. And then I was like, well, I'm actually going to be in your training. So that's when we first met, which was, you know, and it's been obviously, you know, 4 years since then. I remember, and we're going to talk about your Microsoft stuff, but I remember your All-Stars keynote from 2017. I believe it was primarily focused around all the quirks that you can see in Internet Explorer, or like lots of Internet Explorer quirks. I don't think it was ever published because a lot of the All-Star stuff is not published. But like, so yeah, did that kind of work originate from the time at Microsoft, or was that
that's
yeah?
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
No.
Yeah, that was actually like the good old Microsoft days. And most of that is not really secret knowledge, because it's all documented or has been documented in the MSDN, which is respectively was an amazing encyclopedia of insanity. Like there's like so many things in there where you would be like, what the heck is this? Who would write something like that? And parts of my job when working with Microsoft and trying to kind of break IE back then before Edge was out, together with a couple of other gentlemen, one of which you interviewed just like the other day. Like part of my job was like to just like sit in front of my computer and have MSDN in front of me and just like go through the pages and read and read and read and be like, what the heck is this? This can't function anymore. Oh my God. And then just like basically trying it out and realizing that it still works and then finding bugs in there. From logic bugs to crashes to memory corruptions, writing a fuzzer around those things, etc., etc. And yeah, that talk from All Stars was basically like a collection of, I think, like the 10 weirdest things spotted in IE that I could actually talk about. Needless to say, there's more weird things. Some of them we couldn't talk about back then, but yeah, it's just like this browser. Oh my God.
And then like I know there's like there was the compatibility mode, which obviously was still supposed to come back for support, but I guess with the change to Chromium, I guess that's no longer a thing, or is that still a thing?
There was a post recently about the future of IE, and it looks quite bleak. But
Okay.
for a while, there was like the possibility to actually activate this through like a system policy and kind of bring the feature back, even if you would run the modern Edge with Blink engine. So you could actually activate this compatibility mode for a couple of websites that you would allow this on your system, or just like you create like a list of websites where the old IE should be used. There was also a tweet about this, like I think like 2 years ago from our account. But I think this is like gone now. But compatibility view mode was amazing. That was just like so good.
Could you explain that to maybe some people who are listening might not know, like why that was so fun for security research in general and security kind of vulnerabilities?
So the story roundabout goes like this: like imagine you're like a web developer and you're working in the year 1998, and your job is to create like markup and a little bit of JavaScript and a little bit of CSS to come up with a website for your company or for whatever. And then you run it in IE and it looks fantastic, and you run it in Netscape and it looks not so great. And then of course you need to kind of create another version because you have to have one for IE and one for Netscape. Remember back then you had like this branch on pages where it says like, do you want to go here with Netscape or with IE? Which is it gonna be? And then you would get like 2 entirely different pages, at least like markup wise. And people were like, yeah, cool, that's the way web design should work. then they would upgrade the IE version to, let's say, from IE 5 to IE 5.5. And needless to say, there was like fixes in there for all the layout mess that they created. And then you would open your website that would look perfectly fine in IE 5 with IE 5.5. And you would realize that it's broken because a lot of bugs have been fixed that you formerly worked around. So now you realize, shoot, I have to create a website for 3 browsers. And then you do that. And then IE 6 comes out. And guess what happens? Same thing happens. IE 7 comes out, IE 8 comes out, IE 9 comes out. And every single time you have to kind of change your page and make sure that it still works in all versions of IE and other browsers as well, which is impossible. So Microsoft said like, okay, so we accept that there is no way of kind of forcing on developers to constantly change their website markup and layout and styles and whatnots. So we're going to give them a mode with which they can instruct the browser to render the website as if the browser was an old IE, even if it's a modern IE. And that's called like the document mode. So you can basically set this document mode via HTTP header or via meta tag. And then the browser would be like, oh, there's a header coming, like a response header that says, render me as if I was IE5. And then it actually behaves as if it was IE5 by literally using the DLLs and the parts of the code of the layout engine that are IE5 born, even if you run the whole thing with IE11, IE10, IE9 or something newer. And that is, of course, highly interesting because from a security perspective, you can say, well, I have a bug, but this bug only works in IE5, but today everybody's running IE11. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an exploit website that instructs IE11 to behave as if it was IE5, and boom, there you go. Then your bug might be exploitable. And that was the case for many, many findings back then. Like literally like 80% of the findings that I had back then were all nested in alt document modes, and we're using this trick to kind of bring the alt document modes back from the exploit website, or force the document mode on other websites, which is framing them.
Yeah.
And then saying like, hey, I'm going to frame you from a website that is an IE5 mode, so you, framed website, are also running an IE5 mode. Congratulations. And then the XSS would be exploitable. That was super fun.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Internet Explorer had so many quirks too, like with the whole EML stuff as well, where you could just render things in an EML file and still get cross-site scripting, which is kind of crazy to me. But yeah, that was
text, EML, everything. Like there was no limits. Like I still remember when it was like IE6 time and you could cross-site script from a GIF, because it would be like, ooh, a GIF. What could that be? There's markup in there. Let's display this HTML. It's like, what? Seriously? Good times. Good times.
But it's getting close to be dead, which is... So I have a question for you. So you've released a ton of presentations for a long time, from things like DOM clubbering, copy-paste XSS, mutation XSS, which I believe one of your like research papers was in like 2012. What is like one of your favorite presentations or work that you've like published that you're like super proud of?
I think it's both the MXSS paper and the SVG paper, because both passed the test of time. I think it's a bit more the SVG paper, because that contained a lot of my own researches and my own findings that pretty much I actually, so proud, found on myself. Whereas the MXSS paper was also quite interesting, and there was a lot of interesting findings from my end, but it was still standing on the shoulders of giants. And a couple of other people found the original bugs back then, as also documented in the good old HTML5 security cheat sheet. And we just like built on top and looked at those bugs and found new variations and new combinations and so on and so on. But I would say like those two are sticking out, because this is just like two things that keep on giving, both MXSS and SVG. It just like doesn't end, even and especially in combination. Right now, where you have like most MXSS bugs being the mixture of HTML and SVG. So this kind of grew together over time, which is pretty fascinating.
Got it. We're definitely going to talk about mutation XSS, and I will share the HTML5 cheat sheet, or HTML5sec.org, because it obviously, like now with the Portswigger one, I guess maybe like a lot of the information is kind of not irrelevant, but you know, there's the HTML, sorry, the Portswigger like payload list is definitely a lot larger than the what exists in the HTML5sec.org. But I remember like when I was doing esoteric or like finding XSS bugs, and they were doing some type of like, you know, input validation or deny listing, and I was just like basically, okay, I guess I'll jump over to HTML5sec and see if I can utilize some of the obscure payloads for these browsers.
Yeah, back then it was really a goldmine, and it was born out of anger actually. So back then there was like this XSS cheat sheet that was run by Robert Hansen on hackers.org. And it was like the holy grail for us young researchlings to kind of get our own vectors on his cheat sheet. And sometimes people try it and it's just like, look, I found something new. Can we get it on the cheat sheet? Can we get it on the cheat sheet? And usually his response was like, no, because in some variations already on here. So screw off, like leave, like you're not worthy. I see. And at some point, I think it was like pretty much very close when HTML5 came out. We discovered that there's like a couple of attributes that can lead to JavaScript execution that were formerly not there. And I think it was like these form controls with form action, form method, and stuff like this. And I developed a rather simple, actually quite trivial, still working vector that was using those form controls to execute JavaScript URIs. And I said like, look, Snake, I have this thing here and it's like definitely new. Can we get it on the cheat sheet? And he was like, no, I don't have time for that. Bye-bye. And I was like, God damn it. You know what? I'm just going to make my own. And then I decided to make my own cheat sheet. And I was like, mine is going to be better and more colorful. And it's going to have cooler features. And that's when the whole idea with like the tags and the search engine and all the possibilities to kind of filter certain things and select certain things and play with them and have a demo link came to life, because that was just like pretty much me being protesting not to be accepted to the original cheat sheet, and then just like basically saying, you know what, I'm gonna build my own, and that's what you get from that. And that was pretty cool. So nice. And meanwhile like we don't maintain it anymore because The port speaker one is definitely more comprehensive and more up to date. But we see it as like a museum of weird stuff. So if you want to learn about the stuff that was interesting in the past, that was like really, as weird as it could get in terms of what browsers do, then this is the place to go. So it's a museum, and should be seen as such.
I think it's an interesting museum because it just goes to show like how unique each browser was, right? With the way they render things, with what event handlers they added in, with basically kind of a lot of quirks that you just wouldn't experience. Like Opera has very specific things, like Firefox had specific things. They had like, specific video ones, like, for like JSDOM type stuff, and they, all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting to see like the crossover between those things.
Opera was the worst. Opera was so bad. It was the worst browser ever. Like, it's unbelievable how bad this browser was. Like, you would type stuff in the address bar, and you would just like type a lot of A's in the address bar, and eventually the browser would crash, like, because it couldn't handle that. So it's absolutely ridiculous.
Speaking of crashing, I was going to talk about the AngularJS research because you had the Angular binding, the AngularJS. Yeah, but I think we will come back to it if we have time. So I have a question around the security white paper that Cure53. Oh, that's the wrong one. The security white paper that was released by Cure53, and could you just talk about like why that came to be? Because I remember talking to you in like a few years ago, and you were like, wait a few months and there's going to be something really cool dropping. So just like, watch out for it. It's going to be like everything we can think of, everything that we know when it comes to like browsers, and check it out. So like, what was the premise around the Cure53 white paper?
Well, for us, it was basically Google reaching out to us and to another firm, which we didn't know back then, and asking, hey, can you write like a nice comprehensive enterprise browser security white paper with like all the stuff that just like listing all the browsers and comparing their security properties and the privacy properties? And we were like, sure, how much budget do you have? And Google was like, a lot. And it was like, oh, nice. Like the sound of that. So yeah, let's do it. And we did it, and it was amazingly fun. There was a little bit of weird stuff to it too, because it was obvious that it was like a little bit, agenda driven. Because when we said like, yeah, we're gonna put IE in there and Chrome and Opera and Firefox, then they said not Firefox. It's like, why not? No Firefox. And it's like, okay. So, and any problems with no Firefox? We don't want to have Firefox in this paper. It's like, okay, that's weird, but yeah. Then we're gonna add a juicy disclaimer that explains that to people, because we don't want to be the ones who send in the line of fire if people ask, why is there no Firefox in there? So yeah, if that's cool with you, then we can do this. And they said, yep, that's cool with us, but no Firefox. And yeah, then we just like did it. And it was months of work, but it was fantastic. It was like an amazing team exercise. It was tough, but in the end, it was absolutely epic. And we're quite proud about what came out. I mean, probably these days you would have to write a new one because lots of the stuff in there is already outdated. But still, that was like I think that was like a really, really nice piece of work that we delivered, and where the whole team was like really proud of.
So I think,
and hope that like exaggerating things or assuming things too much.
So I pasted it in the chat, so you should definitely read it if you can. If you're interested in web browsers, it's very comprehensive. It has basically most of the ecosystem explained, and it goes into a lot of detail about why things are insecure and obviously could hopefully be improved. Speaking of improvements, let's talk about DOM Purify. So let's talk about so could you explain? We might go like 5 minutes over. Hopefully that's okay. But so let's talk about DOM Purify. So could you explain DOM Purify to the audience if they haven't heard it before? Like, what is DOM Purify?
It's basically a tool that is written in JavaScript that runs in your browser. It also runs on the server, but you really shouldn't do that. But anyway, so it runs on your browser, and it accepts a string of really dirty HTML with like all sorts of stuff in there that shouldn't be in there if security is important to you. And then it does stuff with this HTML, and what falls out is another string of hopefully clean HTML, as an HTML that doesn't contain any means of executing JavaScript, leaking any data, and so on and so on. And it's another project that was born out of anger, so it's kind of a weird pattern, no? I mean, because we were discussing on Twitter, when Twitter was still cool, if it's possible to build a purely client-side sanitizer. And a friend of mine says like, no, it's not possible. You can't do it. And it's like, dude, it's possible. We can do it. And it's like, no, you can't do it. It's impossible. It's too hard. It's like, screw you. We can do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it right now. And then I did it. And what came out was DOM Purify, which was, of course, a mess in the first versions, like in the 0.1, 0.2, whatever versions. It was an absolute catastrophically bad tool. But I think it became something. And I think it got weathered and seasoned over the past months and years. And I think now it's quite a decent sanitizer. We do have, however, and that was a good decision, and that's something that is like in stark contrast to other sanitizers. We do have like a weird philosophy behind this. And the philosophy behind this is to say, by default, we're gonna permit as much stuff as we possibly can. So we're not eager to have like a paranoid default configuration, but rather the exact opposite. And I think some people might say, well, that's not very responsible. You should have like a secure default, right? And I'm saying no, because you can configure it the way you want. And there's like lots of tweaks and lots of tools and lots of config settings that you can actually activate that are really, really simple to use and they're well documented. But the default has to be as tolerant as it can be, because otherwise it wouldn't be an interesting research target. Because otherwise people would look at it and say like, yeah, that's just another sanitizer that works like this. And there is like no means of bypassing it because it only allows A, B, and P, and S and stuff like this. So moving on. But given that we allow so many things, especially SVG and MathML by default, makes us a super interesting target for researchers and for people who want to find bugs. So they do so, and then they report them, and then we fix them. So that means at some point, our tool with default settings that are very, very tolerant and very open, very permissive, will be more secure than all the other tools with restrictive settings. Because people might look at the restrictive settings and like, well, I like anchors and I like bold tags and I like this and I like that, but they're also totally like SVGs. So let's permit them manually in our own config, and boom, then you have a bypass.
Yeah.
Which we don't have because we know already that this is like a risky combination and we act accordingly, whereas the other sanitizers don't because they never had this on the radar. So yeah, this is why I believe that this is the right approach. DOM Purify cause cross-site scripting at some point? No. Was it bypassable and therefore contributed to causing cross-site scripting? Yes, definitely. Is there a possibility that there are still bypasses? Hell yeah, absolutely. I guess so. I don't know any right now, but I think there are. There must be, but so far they haven't been reported. And once they get reported, we fix them in a day. But I guess you know what I'm trying to say is, I think permissiveness in this particular context is super important, because otherwise we would have missed out on so much research on so many bugs. Like pretty much all the MXSS research done by Michał Benkowski, that would not have happened. Like the whole research branch would not have happened, and subsequent research as well. Like this only works thanks to the fact that we're like so permissive and make ourselves become a target. Same with DOM clobbering. Like all that amazing DOM clobbering research. Would that have happened with a very restrictive DOM Purify? I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong, or seeing this from the wrong angle, but that's at least my thinking here.
Interesting. So I have a few questions, which the first one, because I'm sure some people don't understand what mutation XSS or MXSS is. Could you explain like MXSS and why it was important for bypassing something like DOM Purify?
I'm gonna try.
It's not an easy thing to say.
So MXSS sucks. Like it's the worst. Like it's really the worst. Like if you're a developer and want to create like a secure application, you're gonna hate it because it's so bad. Imagine you have a situation where you have a website that you're aiming to protect against cross-site scripting, and you know like all the things that you need to do. You need to like encode and escape and filter and do this and this and that. And then at some point you run into the situation that you say like, well, I want to permit my users to use some HTML, but just like a subset of HTML, just like the cool, like the secure stuff. Let's say, for example, you're maintaining a web mailer or a wiki or a comment section with like rich text, or generally anything with a rich text editor. then needless to say, encoding is not the way to go, but you have to find a different way of allowing only the good stuff, but prohibiting all the bad stuff. And that's, of course, sanitization. So you have like a tool that is sitting somewhere between the attacker-controlled markup and the possible victim. And this tool basically does the same thing as DOM Purify. It takes a string of HTML and then looks at it and makes a couple of decisions and makes a couple of modifications if needs be. And then what falls out is another string of HTML that ideally doesn't do anything bad. And that was what people did in the past, usually on the server. And there was fantastic tools for that. Also not so fantastic tools, but some of them are really, really good, like HTML Purify, for example. Mm-hmm. They would build like a DOM tree and then go over all the branches and all the nodes and check them and work with like allow lists and all these things, so complex stuff. And our thought back then was like, well, we know that the browser needs to change markup to optimize it in some way that it can be better digested by the layout engine, which is usually brittle and needs to be fast. So the browser parses markup before actually sending it to the layout engine and making sure that it's like done in a way that the layout engine can deal with it nicely. So that means that in the situation of an attack, the attacker submits some bad markup, then goes through the sanitizer. The sanitizer filters out the bad things and leaves only the good things, then returns it. Then it arrives in the browser and goes up through the stacks or to the layers of the browser stack, and basically goes from the network stack to the parser, and then from the parser to the layout engine, simply speaking. And we assume that when it arrives in the browser, it is already sanitized and it's safe, and it should be fine to use. But then when the browser does the final optimization from parsing it and then passing the data on to the layout engine, then modifications happen that turn it back into something that is malicious. So the server can never see it because it's happening or it's activated through the modifications, through the optimizations of the browser. And that is the essence of MXSS. Something comes in that looks safe, and the browser's like, ooh, I'm going to optimize this a little bit because I don't want to kind of torture the layout engine too much. Then modifies it, optimizes it, hands it over to the layout engine, and there the script unfolds and executes. That's mutation XSS.
You tried and succeeded. I said you tried and succeeded at actually explaining it.
So then you might say, of course, like, well, this doesn't happen very often. Like, I mean, come on, like the browser vendors must be kind of sure that this is an issue and prevent it. And that's not the case. There's like so many different variations and so many ways of actually causing MXSS to happen. IE was, of course, ridiculous. The optimizations that IE would be doing back then were absolutely ridiculous. So you would get markup that didn't at all resemble what you sent in originally if you kind of tickled it the right way and kind of made it in such a way that you would provoke changes and optimizations that would be bad. And there was, I think, like 6 different categories of MXSS that we had back then. Then there was also a couple of variations in Chrome, where Chrome would say like, well, here we have an anchor, and that anchor has an href, and the first character of the href is some Unicode whitespace. Cool, I can deal with that. And then it puts it in the DOM, and then it optimizes it through the layout engine, or just like rolls it around in the DOM somehow through like inner HTML interaction or something like this. And then in the second turn of rendering it and showing it to the user, after kind of rolling it around in the DOM, it says like, yeah, you know what, Unicode whitespace and an anchor, let's just like kick that out. Let's just throw that out. And then you basically go from a relative URL, because it has Unicode whitespace in front, to JavaScript URI, because the Unicode whitespace is being removed. And then, well, you have a cross-site scripting. Only after, for example, inner HTML of that anchor or the body itself is being touched once. And that's, again, MXSS, because the browser mutates something good into something bad, and then you have JavaScript execution.
And that's also important why the sanitizers kind of come into play here too, because if you look at the sanitizer, a sanitizer is going to go, that's not, a JavaScript URI. It might not be correct, but it doesn't seem malicious, so exactly. I'm not going to get rid of it. So then it goes into the browser and then gets rendered, and then, oh, now you have this, cross-site scripting that wasn't there before. So so mutation XSS is a super, it's a great. So like, I will definitely post in the YouTube section the MXSS for DOM Purify, because it's an amazing piece of work that was performed.
We got kicked in the butt so hard by several researchers, and rightfully so, because we really didn't see those kinds of attacks coming. And I have like the greatest respect for the people who found that kind of stuff and then also helped fixing the issues in DOM Purify. That was amazing teamwork and amazing collaboration. And I didn't believe my eyes when I saw those vectors, especially the MathML related ones. That was crazy stuff. I meanwhile understand them and I can explain them because I also do this as part of my uni lecture. But when I saw them first, I was like, what the how is that even possible? So that was amazing. And that happened just like last year. So that was really cool.
I actually have a funny story. So I have a colleague that essentially just he messaged me and he was like, do you know any like bypasses for like DOM Purify version this? And I like 2 days before I looked in the GitHub issues where someone had just randomly pasted like the bypass. And then they deleted it, but obviously that's not how history works. So you could just go and take a look at the history and see the bypass. And I sent it to him, and I was like, "This should work." And then he was like, "Oh yeah, it worked." And then he responded with, because he found out that I think the person that found it's like 16 years old, and he was like, "Oh yeah." And I asked him recently, like, how do you feel like bypassing DOM Purify? And he was like, "Yeah, I enjoy using like the 16-year-old POC." So that was quite funny.
He's interning with us and doing some external work. So we're guilty of child labor, and I couldn't resist to offer him like a position or like a occasional work with us, and that's going really well. I'm happy to have him on board.
So I have 2 questions, and I know we're getting close to the end. So, like, what are the technical challenges with maintaining a library, like an open source library, specifically when it's meant to be doing security functions? Like what are the technical challenges that you primarily see apart from just bypasses like that come in?
Do its users count as technical challenge?
100%. Yeah.
Because the requests that we sometimes get in through ticket stuff like this, most of them are like actually super valid, but sometimes we have requests that are like, oof, okay, so how the heck am I supposed to do this? Like, this is impossible. So this is like one of the challenging parts, as in like trying to see where the line is between, hey, we should really kind of help you out here and fix this or implement this, versus, no, look, you can just like do this yourself or write a hook, or this actually makes no sense because you're the only person on the entire planet wanting that particular feature. So that's definitely a challenge. And then kind of making the right call between, yeah, we accept this and we're going to work on this, versus, nah, sorry, like we have to reject this. And then, of course, also taking the consequences.
Got it.
And another challenge for us is this dreaded topic of JSDOM, because people run DOM Purify on the server with Node.js and JSDOM. And how do I say this? If you're bored and don't have anything to research right now, but you really want to do some security research that is browser related, please start looking at MXSS in JSDOM, because it's ridiculous. So no one has done this so far, at least not in depth, and it's really worth looking at this, because a lot of bugs and consequently a lot of bounty is hidden in there. Like, please, someone just like go and look at JSDOM and check for MXSS patterns and report them so they can fix them. I know of a couple of ones, and for us it's like, can't really address them because we don't really know what other behaviors are there, and fixes that are just for one specific runtime are like super hard to create and super hard to maintain, which kind of also gets us back to the topic of what are the challenges. So yeah, if someone could take care of that, that would be really nice. And I'm dead sure that there's like heap tons of bounty. Like, want to become a millionaire? Go find MXSS and JSDOM report bugs on all sorts of websites.
Yeah.
Did I say that? Yeah. I think I didn't just think that loud. No, I really said that.
Well, there you go. You know what to do. So I have one final question for you, and it's to do with the new sanitizer GitHub working draft that's potentially coming out for web browsers. You're one of the persons that worked on this draft, and do you see this kind of trying to kind of obliterate XSS as a whole, or do you think it's just kind of allowing the accessibility of having sanitization in the browser?
I think it will never in any way eradicate XSS. Nothing will eradicate XSS. It's impossible. Like, everything that we tried so far was, I don't want to say a failure, but not exactly a major success. Looking at CSP and a couple of other things, like none of those techniques and technologies really kind of made a significant change, I want to say. We still find XSS in pentests all over the place. And if you look at the bug bounty reports, XSS is still like so prominent, so something didn't quite work well. And I think the sanitizer in the browser is just another tool, but there's also an interesting social aspect behind it. And I tried to outline this. I think it was in late 2009 at a conference in San Francisco. Was it? I think it was in San Francisco.
Was it to static HTML? Was it that one?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, that one for Usenix Enigma, where I basically said, look, maintaining a client-side sanitizer, and it's aside from, of course, all those numerous contributors, like in terms of like pure maintenance, it's a one-man show. It's just me. So like I'm the only one who has commit rights. So I could just, I don't know, get hit by a truck tomorrow. I don't want to have that to happen, obviously, but it could happen. And then who's gonna maintain the library? Is someone else gonna take over, or is this thing just gonna be dead, or will someone fork it? What's gonna happen then? Or I could turn malicious. I could be like, I really like the smell of money. I need more. So how about becoming a criminal? And then what? No one would notice. So this is something that shouldn't be, or at least I would have lots of means to kind of hide a backdoor in there and something like this. So this isn't something that should be in the hands of one person or a small group of people. This should be in the hands of a browser vendor, the vast security team and resources, and this should be pretty much exposed to the whole world inside the browser. So also the browser security researchers take care of this and look at this. Not just one library, but it needs to be something that is like so fundamentally woven to the browser core that it receives the maintenance that it actually needs to prosper and to kind of do what it's supposed to do. And what I want to do is of course, I still want to continue maintaining DOM Purify. It's fun. I like it. It really fills me with joy, at least most of the time. But I don't want to be the only one next to a couple of other people who also maintain sanitizer libraries who bear this responsibility, because something could happen. And then what? And in the browser realm, it's like much more unlikely that someone puts in a backdoor or bad code, or someone just abandons the project. And making this a browser feature and making this a standard is basically making sure that over a longer term of time, this is a feature that can be used reliably and robustly and securely without having any concerns. So I'm not planning to kind of turn rogue and backdoor DOM Purify, but I could. So
we'll save the backdooring AngularJS for another time. But so we've reached the. But that's I 100% agree with you. That's a very valid point on the sense of like, just a small group of team maintaining it versus a giant organization like Google, especially since the Chrome ecosystem or Mozilla team have such a larger engineering team, and like a lot, like even like Mozilla, for example, they're super privacy centric, right? And they're super like security centric, and they would want to make sure that they have something like a sanitizer. So I completely agree.
And I think it's a nice joint venture that is happening there, because Freddie is on board from Mozilla, and the Googlers have some people on this with Daniel Vogelheim. And we had lots of conversations in Schloss Darkstuhl at one of the research meetings, also with Microsoft involved, and everybody was like basically agreeing, saying like, yeah, this should really be in the browser. This shouldn't be done by like one dude somewhere in Germany, because anything could happen. So I think this is so far fantastically going. There's implementations, you can test them. There was first bypasses already, and they have been fixed already. And nice. I think this has future. And it's not going to deprecate DOM Purify, because we still might have more configurability, at least for the next years. Mm-hmm. So if you want to really do some hardcore markup management, then you still need the JavaScript library. But it offers you a simple to use and secure by default tool in the browser, accessible to anyone, and with much more reliability and robustness than a single person maintaining a JavaScript snippet can ever deliver, can ever offer. And I think that's key here, because it's still a security tool, so it must function as expected.
Exactly. I think that's a great place to stop, Mario. Thank you so much for today. This has been a great experience. I do apologize to the stream. There was a bit of an echo for the first 30 minutes, but we fixed it. And obviously we talked about all the juicy stuff at the end anyway, so everyone should still get that. But I do appreciate your time, Mario. This has been great. can't wait to have a beer again in person, and hope you have a good day.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Same to you. Thanks for having me, and talk to you later.
Talk to you later. This was the 7th episode of SecuriTEA Crumpets. Thank you, Dr. Mario Heiderich, for being on the stream today. Please feel free to check out Cure53 on Twitter, and also cure53.de if you want to visit their website. See you in 2 weeks for the next SecuriTEA Crumpets.